Welcome back to News and Views. I'm Joel Heitkamp, your host, coming to you live from Bismarck, North Dakota. I've got Nick Archuleta with me. He is the head of ND, North Dakota United. Nick, first off, just you know it, I know it, most of the listeners know it. Tell them what North Dakota United is.
Well, I'd be happy to, Joel, and thank you for having me on today. North Dakota United is the merged association of the former North Dakota Public Employees Association and the North Dakota Education Association. We represent about 10,000 active members, and we have about 11,300 members in total, student members and retired members.
So this can go from the guy that's out there sanding the roads right now to the guy or the gal that's sitting in that school trying to teach somebody geometry.
Absolutely, and higher ed, support professionals as well.
I always forget to mention higher ed. They're a big part of this, and I got family in it.
Yeah.
So thank you. You saved my butt there. She would have chewed me out.
Anytime.
I want to talk a little bit about this session, because I was out here when the people that you're representing, whether they were operating under a different name or not, doesn't really matter. You were told to wait, that times were tough and to wait. I went through some of the details of Governor Dalrymple's budget, and it seems to me that Governor Dalrymple is keeping his word on moving forward with helping public employees. And I throw that out there as a Democrat to a Republican to commend him for his dedication to public employees. I like what I see so far in his budget, and I want your take on that.
Yeah, we are fully supportive of the governor's budget. He does take care of public employees in this budget, and there's going to be $2 billion, more than $2 billion going into education, so we are obviously quite happy with that. The governor, throughout his career as a legislator and as lieutenant governor when he headed the Governor's Commission on Education, has shown a real dedication and a real sense to value education in the state, and we really applaud him for that.
There's a lot of things that are going on in education right now, a lot of shortages. Your people are being asked to do more with less. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it'd be like to be a sixth grade teacher in Williston, North Dakota today, Nick.
Oh, I got to tell you, I have an opportunity on occasion to speak with those folks that are impacted, and it's not just in the oil-rich West. Same thing in Fargo. West Fargo, for example, I think they've opened a school, at least one school, in each of the last 4 years. So there's tremendous growth in the student population. There is also a great need for more teachers. I think that at one point there were something on the order of 200 teacher shortages towards the end of August. I think that number dropped a little bit, but it does paint the picture that we need more people, dedicated people, going into the teaching profession.
Is pay ever going to fix it all? Because here's my thought. Somewhere along the line, growing up as a kid, what I wanted to be is I wanted to be a teacher and a coach, and it not necessarily in that order. I wanted to be around the game of football, around the game of baseball all my life. And the best way I thought I could do that was to probably be a teacher, and then you got to coach kids, and you got to be around athletics, and that was a dream. And I remember my dad looking at me just like it was yesterday. And he said, okay, that's what you want to be. You want to be poor all your life. And he valued teachers. Some of his, he that isn't the point he was trying to make. The profession he respected. And believe me, he never said a bad word around a teacher to him.
No.
But his point was that the pay never gets to where you could make in the private industry. And so when I was out here, I used to see how some of that unfoiled, and you were told to wait and wait and wait, and now I see us catching up, and yet we're still not catching up with the number of bodies we need to do these jobs.
Well,
and so how do we fix that, Nick?
Well, I think we fix that by taking a look at the profession and making it a profession that is widely respected. If you look at some of the countries that are a place ahead of us in the PISA test results, for example, in Finland, those teachers there they'll teach from, let's say, 8 in the morning till about 11:30. And in fact, I have a friend who works for the American Federation of Teachers who was there to study their system. And what happened was that as he was watching one class on his first day there, at 11:30, the kids got up and they put on their coats and they started going. And he asked the teacher, he said, does everybody just go home for lunch? And he says, no, they're finished. And he says, well, what are you teachers going to do the rest of the day? Well, what they do the rest of the day is that they collaborate with one another, they critique each other's lessons, they talk about student results, and in essence, they have the time to put in the collaborations that's necessary to have a good, well-rounded education ready to deliver. And it should serve as a model for American schools.
We've been very complimentary of the governor.
Yep.
But I'm going to also throw this out there. I think by and large, the men and women that serve in these legislative chambers respect the people that you represent. I believe that. And I believe that they've got their backs. I know Republicans and Democrats alike up there who are fully in support of North Dakota public employees and teachers. That being said, I know some others that aren't. I'm sorry, Nick, but I know some others that aren't. You know what I'm going to bring up?
I think I do.
I'm going to bring up Common Core. I'm going to bring up the fact that when I sit down with some of your best and brightest, the superintendent right here in Bismarck was sitting right with me. A brilliant woman. I mean, just articulating a message of why Common Core is good and why we shouldn't be afraid of what this can do for our children and all this. And then I look at, I've got a copy of the bill, 1461, and I look at these names, and it's like, come on, guys. I mean, you've got guys that it doesn't surprise me, some of the names that are on this, but I guess I got to get to a question here. My question is this. Is the opinion of professionals, teachers that are in those classrooms, respected by the majority of people out in that hallway to where something like 1461 will not become law? Because what this bill does is it eliminates the Department of Public Instruction.
For all intents and purposes, you're correct in your analysis, Joel. Let me just say this. I believe, and I agree with what you said, that the vast majority of those people that are in the halls here of the legislature do value education, and they want to do the right thing. And even the people that had signed on to 1461 probably feel in their minds that what they're proposing is in the best interest of teachers and children. It is not, however. And if you take a look at the folks that support Common Core, I mean, you have the Greater North Dakota Chamber, the North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders, which of course is the administrators group, the North Dakota School Board Association. You have Governor Dalrymple. You have Superintendent Basler, who, by the way, was elected by the same people that elected the legislature.
Wait a second. Let me bring this up, because politics play a factor in this building. They do.
Oh, yeah.
The vast majority of people that represent North Dakota are Republicans. You just said Governor Dalrymple. Let's do some math on this. Republican. You just said Kirsten Basler. Republican. You just said the North Dakota Chamber. I'm sorry, but the last time I went, you didn't see a whole lot of people with peace signs walking around at the North Dakota Chamber meeting. You know what I'm getting at?
I think they saved that
Republican,
for
right? Okay, so and that doesn't mean there aren't active Democrats in the chamber.
Sure.
I'm not trying to diminish their role in helping all businesses. What I'm trying to say is this isn't coming from the moderates in this state. This is coming from the far right, Nick.
Well, I could agree. I could not agree with you more. I mean, it's clear that that's the case. You have some folks who have bought into the notion that there is some sort of a huge conspiracy, and they have tried to obfuscate the potential of good that could come from Common Core. I mean, these are standards. We've had standards in North Dakota since forever. Okay, so we've always had standards. When most people talk about Common Core, their complaints are with the curriculum. Well, guess what? The curriculum is decided at the local level. The standards are the standards. The curriculum is what you use to attain those standards. So this idea that there's not going to be any local control, or that one of the wackier claims I've heard is that the second graders will be taught sex ed. Well, no, that's not going to happen.
But if you say it enough times, people start to believe it.
That's true. Well, you hear at the same time, you hear people say these are dumbing down the standards, or these standards are too rigorous to be met. Well, they can't be both. So what I would do is encourage anybody listening to go find out the truth about the Common Core. And guess what? Those standards that are in place are good for kids. They'll help them to attain even more from their public education experience.
If the public themselves, if you have a child, if you have a grandchild, if you care about education at all, go online. The North Dakota Legislative website is one of the tops in the nation. It really is. It's easy to navigate. It's easy to find this legislation. Go to 1461 and look at Section 2. You owe it to yourself to immediately look at Section 2. What you're going to see in Section 2 is the taking away of any authority from the Department of Public Instruction and placing that in the hands of the legislature. And I'm sorry, these same people are making the argument to me, Nick, that they don't want the federal government dictating anything core curriculum, and now they're telling me, but they want it themselves. The federal government doesn't have it. Kirsten Baszler and the people on school boards have it.
That's exactly right. And, all of those people that you just mentioned, school boards and Superintendent Baszler, they're elected too. And they are elected to do a job, and what Representative Casper's bill would do would be to prevent her from doing that. And that's not right, and it's not fair. We're one of only 14 states that elect a superintendent of public instruction. And we trust
because we value it that much.
We do. We trust, in this case, her to do a very good job administering public education in our state. And by and large, she certainly has done that. I think and she doesn't mean to write in and defend her, but I do believe, honestly, that she has gotten a raw deal from some of that very small, vocal minority of the supermajority in this legislature.
And here's what's happening, folks, if you're listening. Call Kirsten Baszler, because you get beat up, you get beat down, pretty soon you're worried about the very budget you got to operate under. Because if they can't beat you on the front of, hey, we're going to dictate, you got guys like Representative Ruby and there's nothing wrong with homeschooling, but he's a homeschooler. And he's going to dictate the core curriculum versus a school board, versus teachers, versus a superintendent, versus the Department of Public Instruction. And so you've got people like him and Jim Casper and I'm sorry, but I ran into Blair Thorson out in the hallway today, and I said, Blair, what are you doing on this bill? Why did you sign it? He said, well, I'm not walking around with a tinfoil hat on, Joel. That I'm not, I just think it's a subject that needs to. When you sign on to a bill and the bill says something, that means you support it. I'm sorry, but you do. Now, that being said, Nick, I got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about higher ed, because I think oftentimes these people in higher ed, the controversies that have become with higher ed way overshadow the good that's being done in that classroom at higher ed. And I want to talk about some of your workers there as well, okay?
Great.
To rmhcfargo.org.
Listen to that music, Bobby Harris Springs. Nick Archuleta and I come from kind of that era, right?
Yeah.
We should be able to listen to the music we want.
Darn right.
I don't want any Beyonce. Ever since Amy left, and we never have Beyonce arguments anymore here on News and Biz. I actually miss my Amy Eiler quite a bit. She's moved on, folks. I get messages from people saying, where is Amy? Well, Amy's got a gig in the East. A lot on the statewide audience don't get a chance to hear it, but in KFGO, she's got a new show, It Takes Two, with her and Jack Sunday, and quite frankly, I'm intimidated by it because I'm sick of everybody telling me how great she is and how bad I am. So way to go, AI. She's doing absolutely great. Nick Archuleta is my guest. Nick, I want to talk about higher ed and how you get caught in crosshairs sometimes, the people that you represent. And here's what I'm getting at. You've got board members resigning off boards rather than going through confirmation hearings. You've got a war going on up here that people – it's fair to put it that way. You've got legislators that don't trust higher ed. You've got higher ed that don't trust certain legislators. All of this, sometimes I worry about the people you represent that are in the classrooms that are doing the job, that they're getting caught in these crosshairs.
Well, they really are. Unfortunately, in the last session, probably going back to Dr. Shivani's departure, from that point on, that took all the oxygen out of the room. When people should be talking about the great research that's going on in our two wonderful world-class research universities, they were talking about buyouts of the Dr. Shivani's contract and other things. Who's going to control higher ed? Well, I think, and I was hoping that this would be the last word on it. You remember, I think it was Measure 3.
Yep.
Excuse me, last November 4th.
The anti-higher ed people pushed Measure 3 hard.
Right. They sure did, and it came up a loser.
Not just a loser.
Not just a loser. It was blown out of the water 80-20.
Yep.
So that should have sent a message that the voters of North Dakota, the people of North Dakota, wanted to keep that autonomous governing body in place, and they didn't want the university system to be governed here in the capital. There's plenty of work for legislators to do beyond that,
right.
and I think that's the people of North Dakota understand that. Now, of course, we had Dietrich's resignation, and we'll be looking to fill that place, that spot on the board. What I'm hoping for is.
Do you guys weigh in on that?
We do. We are a part of a committee that.
Do you encourage people to apply?
Yes.
Do you? Do you give the governor recommendations? What role do you play in that?
Well, we do. We meet on that committee. There's the President Pro Tem, the House Speaker, I believe, is on there, and then Superintendent Baszler's on there, the Chief Justice and newest Rough Rider Award winner is on there, and we are on there. North Dakota United has a voice there. And what we do is we go through the nominations that are put in, and there are certain rules that govern it. For example, you can't have more than 2 people serving that have a Bachelor of Science degree from the same university, that sort of thing. So we take all that into account, and we pass along sets of recommendations to the governor, and he makes the choice.
So then it's fair for me to ask you this question, since you do have a hand dealt in that. Do you look at it geographically? Because it's my belief that this board's really becoming a Fargo board.
Yeah, we do. And in fact, I believe that there are some stipulations that have to be met, if they can be. If there are nominees from those regions, they have to be their geographic location has to be taken into account.
Okay, a little bit tougher question. You're not going to like this one. You're an educated man and you're a respected man, or you wouldn't have the job you had. Would you ever apply for this job?
No.
Think about that. Think about the fact that you just said no. I didn't know what you were going to say, but it doesn't surprise me that you said no, which means how do good people then succeed at this job?
Well, there are good people out there that have a real passion for delving into this, and frankly, the patience for delving into it. I'm not saying that the board, the State Board of Higher Education, didn't cause some of their own problems. They certainly did. You cannot keep violating open meeting laws and then have your board undergo training. I mean, you have an attorney on the board. You have one assigned from the AG's office. As I mentioned, they took the training and then turned around and had another open meetings violation.
Okay, but let me be the jerk on this.
Okay.
I understand what you're getting at, and you're right. I'll acknowledge that. But I'm not going to take a bunch of legislators saying all they do is violate open meetings laws when they do it every day. They exclude themselves from the law, and then they criticize when others do it. So I'll listen to you say it because you got to live by them, but I'm not going to listen to them say it. Okay?
Fair enough.
Okay.
But I do think, though, that the system that's in place to govern higher education is a good system, and there are good people on that board. And I think that you're going to see that if they're given a little breathing room out from underneath the microscope, that they're going to be fine.
I'm going to check my clock here a little bit with Bob Harris back in the studio, but hang with me. I got a couple more questions. You got more time, or you got to be in a hearing somewhere?
No, I'm fine.
I also want to talk about your legislative agenda. We'll be back. Welcome back to News and Views, and to our affiliates out there. The conversation was going so good. We apologize to you. We're back on track. We're back doing what we're doing. Nick Archuleta is with me. He's head of North Dakota United. We're talking about higher ed before the break, and I asked him a question. I said, would you ever apply for a job on the State Board of Higher Education? And he answered honestly. He said no. If good people like you don't want to be on that board, I've got a friend back home that applied for the board, and I'm proud of the fact he applied for the board. I think he'd be great on the board. Didn't get the position, whatever that process is. I get all of that. But I really believe that it matters so much who these people are that are on this board. And I'm not talking R or D or, just people who understand how a board works. And then, Nick, I believe that the governor needs to give clear direction of how he expects his university system, because he's the chief executive of the state of North Dakota, to run. Does he want it as a chancellor-led system down, or does he want these campuses to have autonomy to say, no, this is how my campus runs?
Well, I couldn't agree more. The governor, of course, is the head of the executive branch, and he does need to make a clear signal, and I believe he probably has done that. When I said no,
we might disagree on that.
We could,
okay.
But I'm sure if he hadn't before, I bet he's going to do it now.
I think he's got
because
it. Because
he is a very bright man, and I'm sure he's tired of all the hubbub around this board. But when I said no about taking that job before, I should have qualified that by saying, first, I have a job that I love, and secondly, you're right. The person who takes that job shouldn't. The D or the R shouldn't matter. The C should. That commitment. You have to be committed to this work. You have to be committed to learning as much as you can about it. And on top of that, you have to keep in mind that this is a volunteer board. They don't get paid tons of money to do this. The materials that they have to cover, the things that they have to know is huge. So,
well, and my neighbor at the lake is brother-in-law and sister-in-law with Klaus Lemke. And so I get to see Klaus a lot in the summer, or run into him once or twice, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Klaus. I'm a big Klaus fan, and in talking to him, he says, Joel, you would be amazed at the amount of work there is to it. He was just being honest. And Mike Haugen, General Haugen, said the same thing. He said it's a major time commitment.
It really is. And Klaus Lemke had a short term on the board, but he was great. And I share your admiration of him. He's a terrific man.
So what's your agenda this session? If at the end of this session you guys are good at report cards, believe me. I know the good and the bad days of that. If at the end of this session, the teachers and the public workers out there looked at everything and said, okay, this was a good session for us, how would you determine that?
Well, we would determine it by seeing just how much of the governor's budget gets through intact. As I mentioned before, for teachers, there's $2 billion plus going into education. We would certainly hope that remains. For public employees, we put in a bill, it's a sick leave bill that allows them to use sick leave for things like adoption, which doesn't happen now. And I think that they would like to see something like that. We are in full-throated support of early childhood that's outlined in the governor's budget as well. It's only a $6 million investment, but it's a step in the right direction. We were one of very few states that didn't put any state money into early childhood education. There is a need for early childhood education. The benefits for early childhood education on that student are long-lasting. So
I got a friend back home who it's tough for you to be a Democrat. He came as close as you can to winning a race in North Fargo, and one of the things he talked about every day was early childhood education. And basically he was afraid of his wife. She's a longtime educator and one of the best Fargo ever had, and she told him, she said, this is serious. We got to get caught up with other states when it comes to this.
Well, you're absolutely right, and so was your friend. North Dakota, I think, is going to make a positive choice here. I think that the early childhood education funding will stay. It'll serve roughly 12,000 or 6,000 kids, something like that, that are four-year-olds, and that will be terrific enhancement for many communities. And then one of the things about that early childhood education funding is it isn't just for public schools. Obviously, we can get highly qualified people in to daycares and even some church-run daycares to do that.
The president last night in the State of the Union address pointed out that one of the biggest challenges facing young families is daycare. And he talked about the expense of daycare, the availability of daycare. He talked about a tax cut for young families as they go through that daycare process and how that could be a boost up. I just found it refreshing. I was disappointed in how our congressman responded to. I mean, there's good and bad in every speech. I can understand that. I would have embraced the good, and to me, this tax break was one of the good parts of that State of the Union address last night.
You're not kidding. I have 2 daughters, and they each have kids, and the child care is a major expense.
Right.
So
and you know what your daughter would be spending that money on if she could get that tax break? Life.
Life.
She wouldn't be putting it in a cream can and burying it in the Capitol yard here. She'd be spending it on life. She'd be buying a vehicle or maybe buying a different home, or it works the way capitalism is supposed to work.
Yes, exactly. And I think all the help that we can give folks who are struggling with that particular debt or bill for child care, that's good on us. So I agree that that's a proposal that deserves serious consideration.
What about the boys right now out there sanding these roads that you represent? What about the average Joe worker out there that gets up at 3 a.m. and I'm calling saying you got to hop on the radio and tell me what the road conditions are. The Overbys and the Kevin Osters of the world, my buddies.
Right, and Mike Stebbins up there in Underwood.
There you go.
One of the things, here's a little story about Mike that he told me. He says when the weather is bad or when they know bad weather is coming, he actually sleeps on a cot at his workplace, so he doesn't have to worry about getting to work and getting right out there on that truck and moving that snow. I mean, that's the kind of dedication.
That's dedication.
And you know what? You see that same dedication in public employees no matter where you go, no matter where they work. They work very hard. They provide the vital services that we depend on, and they deserve something. And one of the things that with any sort of pay raise that they're going to get, we want to make sure that every public employee gets that pay raise in the percentage that the legislature intends. What happens sometimes is that you'll get money for wages, let's say at North Dakota State University, and they have some expenses with their people getting tenure and promotion. So there's that goes. But that person in the library that was supposed to get a 3% pay increase now gets a 1.5% pay increase, and that's not what the legislature intends, I don't believe, and we hope that that gets rectified.
Well, and I think that's important because they were told to wait. Many, many years, these people were told to wait, that it wasn't there for them. Be patient with us. When the state benefits, you'll benefit. They were told to just be patient. By God, they shouldn't have to be patient anymore.
Right.
The money's there to make sure that they're treated the way they should be treated as the professionals they are.
Exactly, and they are professionals. They're doing things under some really difficult conditions sometimes that you couldn't do, I couldn't do, and they should be recognized for that.
I got to tell you got a great job, and you work for some good people. So how's this work? Do you do it for a couple of years, and then you go back into the classroom, or what do you do?
Well, what happened was at the merger, we're being governed right now by a merger agreement that lasts 3 years. And so my term, I'm in the second year of my term. At the third delegate assembly in the spring of 2016, there will be an election, and I can run for re-election or not.
So you still can, though?
Sure.
You're not termed out? It's nothing like that?
No.
Okay. Give me a button. I'll wear it for you.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Nick, good to talk to you. Thanks, bud.